Welcome to the Market Recap, your weekly digest of the biggest market stories from the past week. Join host Anna Serin and financial expert Bruce Campbell as they go beyond the headlines to deliver cutting-edge insights into news that move the market. Proudly presented by the Canadian Securities Exchange.
Hi, my name's Anna Serin, and I'm Director of Listings Development with the Canadian Securities Exchange. You're joining us for yet another market recap here on Friday, October 7th, 2022. I'm not joined by my normal host today, Bruce Campbell. I am joined by Jordan Youl with StoneCastle Investment Management. Thank you for joining me, Jordan.
Yeah, it's good to be back. Thanks for having me.
Normally, I get to see you on Quadruple Witching Day. All of our viewers should know that by now, what that day means. But it's nice to have you. I haven't seen you in a while.
Yeah, no, good to see you for sure.
Okay, so there's lots to break down today, so I'm going to jump right into it. We did not do a market recap last week in honor of the Day of Truth and Reconciliation. We took a day of quiet thought for that day, but there was a lot that did happen last week, so we're going to touch on that a bit. It was the end of the quarter, and there's obviously a lot going on in the market right now, so you're going to help us break that down. We're going to talk about the market overview last week, this week. We're going to talk about OPEC. There was some interesting information that came out and how that affected the markets. It made the US a little angry. We're going to talk about the cannabis reform. Biden came out and had some pretty impactful words on the cannabis industry. We're going to talk about that. And then, of course, we're going to get into some CSE issuer news. So, Jordan, let's break down what happened in the markets.
Yeah, like you said, there's so much to talk about. But, if we just go back to last Friday, it was month end, it was quarter end. I do have a long-term chart just showing and illustrating the longer-term trends of the equity markets and the common benchmarks that are followed by investors. It's the 25-year chart of the S&P 500, the Dow, the NASDAQ, and the TSX in the lower panel. The takeaway here is that last Friday, the close was very negative. Effectively, the market closed close to the month low, which inevitably was the quarter low as well. But the takeaway here is that, the S&P 500, for example, has been negative for 3 consecutive quarters. That doesn't happen too often. If you look back at this 25-year history, last time it occurred was during the financial crisis, and prior to that was the early 2000s during the tech wreck. So across the board, in the equity markets, longer term, there is some concern for the equity markets, but we are starting to see some opportunities in the short term that we're trying to capitalize on right now.
Interesting. And so what's the prediction of what's going to happen next? I mean, obviously we've been watching this for some time.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a thought that this will trend in a good direction?
Yeah, there's a lot of factors that can definitely move the needle. I think from a mean reversion perspective, Q4 historically is quite positive for equity markets in general. And as a sweetener, anytime we're in a midterm election year, the equity markets generate above average returns in Q4. From a sentiment perspective, whether you look at the put-call ratio, the North American Active Investment Manager Index, or even the polls like the American Association of Individual Investors and the bull-bear spreads, we're at really washed out pessimistic levels. So from a contrarian standpoint, that is opportunistic. And we did see a little bit of that on Monday and Tuesday this week.
Well, hopefully things keep going in the right direction. Okay, we're going to talk about OPEC. So just a reminder, viewers, OPEC is the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries. So they obviously came out this week and said that they are going to reduce production. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. If you go back to early June, WTI was trading around $120 a barrel. It got down to as low as around $80 ballpark. So they came out on Wednesday and announced that they were doing a pretty extensive cut, 2 million barrels a day beginning next month. And just in the comparison, we haven't really seen that reduction since, 2020, when we're in the midst of COVID. Energy stocks have rebounded as a result of that. WTI last time I looked was around $92. So the price has increased since that announcement. And that's been one of the bright spots this week is the energy stocks have had a really good week so far. But yeah, the takeaway and the premise behind that was to increase the spot price for oil. The U.S. wasn't overly enthusiastic about it. Biden came out shortly thereafter announcing that they were going to release 10 million barrels of oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve next month as well. We're seeing that that's going to have that trickle down effect to the consumer as well, right? We're seeing that at the gas pumps right now as well. So as an investor, it's positive for energy stocks. At the portfolio, we've been increasing our exposure to energy. That's been very accretive this week. And again, that's positive. But it could have, a little bit of a negative impact on the economy and on the consumer.
Okay, so there's a few things I want to ask you about this. So first of all, OPEC is, I believe it's 13 participating countries. Does that sound about right?
Yeah.
And so when they say that they're going to reduce the production of oil, it's kind of create a sell and demand thing, right?
Exactly.
So in essence, it's meant to be a good thing because there's times where they can increase and decrease and they kind of decide together. But I think I did read somewhere that there are concerns that they did this to help Russia with their war against Ukraine. Is that just editors getting creative, or is that a legit thing?
I think a little bit of both. Obviously, the Putin war is going to have an impact as well. But I guess given the economic environment we're in right now, with record high inflation, and the Fed, we're dealing with rate hikes, slowing economy. From a timing perspective, it could backfire in a way too. So,
okay, well, that was going to be my other question is, as a U.S., and they're not very happy, they're talking about a reform bill called NOPEC. And I would assume the countries that are really fearful of this is because everyone's working so hard to reduce inflation. If they reduce the production of oil, doesn't that add inflationary pressure?
It does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right?
It's a factor for sure. Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, it could have a ripple effect. We might not feel it immediately, but it could affect us in multiple quarters. And, even strategists from other institutions are calling for, a recession in 2023. I know the USLEI index came out a couple weeks ago, and they effectively announced a recession. One their models, the USLEI index from the Conference Board, which is widely followed. It's an indicator that we like to use as well. Back in August, it was showing warning signs, and then last month they released it, and it actually printed a recession signal. So that's definitely on people's minds right now.
Yeah, we're already in it. We don't want it to get worse. Yeah. Okay, well, we'll see what happens there. Okay, we're going to talk about the cannabis reform. So Biden came out. I'm just going to quote a few things that he said. Where are my notes here? He came out and made an announcement. And this is a big deal. So we've been waiting. First of all, we've been waiting for cannabis to become federally legal or decriminalized in the U.S. for some time. The wonderful thing about the CSE is that we opened our doors to cannabis-focused issuers that if they're legal in the jurisdiction where they operate, that they can list with us. So that's why we've had such a budding sector on our exchange. But there's kind of been all this talk about when this is going to become federally legal. So Biden came out and he is announcing the pardon of all prior federal offenses of simple possession of marijuana. He's urging all governors to do the same with regard to state offenses. And he's asking the Secretary of Health and Human Services and the Attorney General to initiate the administrative process to review expeditiously how marijuana is scheduled under federal law. This is a big deal, right, Jordan?
It is. Yeah, absolutely. The latter point, with the reclassification of the Scheduled 1, right? That has an immediate impact, right? If it gets reduced to like a Scheduled 2, because effectively right now as a Scheduled 1 narcotic, it is in the same category as heroin and LSD, right? And even fentanyl, which is kind of like the reason with this opioid crisis or epidemic that we're dealing with, cannabis is rated stronger or more worse off than fentanyl. So if it gets re-rated as a Schedule 2, then that is a significant catalyst and tailwind for these MSO operators.
Yeah, I mean it's a huge deal. I did a wonderful interview with Steve D'Angelo. It's on CSC TV if you want to go check it out. Under our Cannabis Investor series, it was an amazing interview. He was the creator of the Last Prisoner Project, and we talked about these offenses that U.S. citizens that they have to deal with just for small possession. They can't get student loans. They have difficult time getting jobs. They have a difficult time leasing or renting homes, leasing vehicles. It really impacts their whole lives. And so this is going to be a big deal for the US. It's going to be a big deal for the cannabis space, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And just to add to that, just from a economic standpoint, it'll probably reduce the tax burden as well. Like a lot of these like minor, possession sentences were quite lengthy from a duration standpoint as well.
Yeah.
Plus, it will also reduce prison population too.
Yeah, it'll be well, and I think that was a big part of it. There was a lot of, back we're talking a few decades back, but a big part of the prison was just cannabis possession. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. On that note, we're going to move to CSC issuer news, and I'm going to talk about Curaleaf again. They completed their acquisition of Trike companies. Bolster companies' presence in 3 growth markets, which is Arizona, Nevada, and Utah. The completion, or once the acquisition is completed, it will be a valuation of $181 million. This is an amazing acquisition. So congratulations to Curaleaf. In general, I just want to talk to you about cannabis stocks. I mean, obviously, StoneCastle Investment Management, you guys were one of the first firms to have a fund in the cannabis space. So what Biden came out and said today, and some of the amazing acquisitions and financings we're seeing in the space, cannabis has had a little bit of a rough go. Are we turning over a new leaf?
I think so. I think, yeah, there hasn't been a lot of positive news, right? Yesterday really changed things. And we do have a chart of how the MSOS ETF responded when the White House released that statement yesterday. All these MSOs were up by a considerable margin. The MSOS ETF was up around 34%. We were happy, obviously, with our pure play cannabis fund that we managed with Spartan and had a great day yesterday. And with our other mandates, we've been increasing our exposure to the cannabis sector, which is fantastic. But yeah, to your point, I would explain it as like holding a beach ball like underwater, right, and just letting go. Right, it's just spring loaded, and that's exactly what we saw yesterday. We're getting a little bit of a pullback today. There's probably a lot of short covering as well that took place yesterday, but the reaction was very, very positive. I think this is just a segue, early steps for between the SAFE Act, and obviously we're dealing with the midterms, which could potentially create an opportunity for U.S. listings and get exposure through different financings and whatnot. So hopefully this is the beginning of something bigger and better.
Okay, so my question for you is it odd that it's having a moment in the sun when the rest of the markets are really struggling, that the cannabis space would do so well? I mean, obviously it's for very legitimate reasons, but normally we don't see kind of a sector like this do so well when, we're dealing with kind of the economy as a whole.
Yeah, exactly. And I think I spoke about this, several months ago, but the big difference is correlation, right? The cannabis sector, doesn't necessarily move in sync with the equity markets. Like the markets were down yesterday, cannabis did well, but it wasn't just yesterday. We've been seeing this for a few months now, where the underlying breadth and accumulation in the cannabis sector, especially in the MSOs, was showing signs of improvement. We were seeing that positive divergence and momentum. It wasn't necessarily reflected in the price. Like the stocks were more or less going sideways, but the underlying momentum was building. And, again, like as an investor in this type of market environment, you want to own assets that have a low correlation to the equity market. Right, we're seeing a lot of risks and systemic risks in the equity markets right now, but there are pockets like energy and cannabis where you can do well and capitalize on this emerging trend right now.
Well, and let's not forget that the smart money, I think, was slowly piling up in there because, excuse me, the especially the MSOs, they had amazing fundamentals and depressed share prices. So the smart money saw, the fundamentals are there. At some point, there'll be an opportunity. I mean, I know as investor sentiment, I woke up this morning and thought, I might do some investing today. I mean, you kind of got that bubbly, excited feeling, which is probably what a lot of investors felt. Do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. And going back to this, review for rescheduling with the MSOs, like right now, they're impacted by the 280E tax code, right? So they cannot write off or deduct their normal operating expenses, right? Because of that, because
Which
they're
is a big
because
deal.
they're scheduled 1. So if they get beneath that schedule 2, then they are not going to be paying significant taxes. Their marginal tax rate will come down, and that in itself will improve, their EBITDA margins, like by
Oh,
a
it's
considerable
huge.
margin, right? So that's been a headwind and a pain for these MSOs because they generate so much cash flow, but they're paying, you know, significant amount in taxes.
And
So
they
if
can't
that gets
write those things off.
re-rated, yeah, if it gets re-rated as like a Schedule 2 or lower, then they're going to be there. That 280E tax code doesn't apply to them anymore.
So that'll probably result in a huge jump in their share prices, right? Because if all of a sudden they're more valuable, right?
They're more valuable, and it creates more opportunity. And like again, that could be a segue into that SAFE Act and other catalysts that we've been waiting for quite some time to get the
Absolutely.
sector going.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. Okay,
Mm.
so what should we think about going into next week other than it is Thanksgiving weekend here in Canada? So hopefully everyone has wonderful dinner plans with family. We're not in lockdown this year. So hopefully everyone gets to be together as a family and have a wonderful meal. But what should we think about next week?
For next week, the market's really going to be paying attention to the CPI number. We want to see that rate of change month over month decline, right? So I think the market's going to be paying close attention to that. And, it's kind of kicking off earnings season, right? We're going to get the Q3 results. Companies are going to start to report, but I think the market is really going to be looking for guidance, like where do we go from here?
Yeah.
So I think that's the starting point. Last time I looked, intraday today, we're kind of low of day today. We're not really getting any follow through. Like we're up this week, which is great, but a lot of that was made from Monday and Tuesday, and I really believe that was just a function of, quarter end and rebalancing. So we'd like to see the market improve a little bit, market breadth to broaden out. But the big question is, at these current levels, are these support levels going to hold? Right, we did undercut those June lows last week, and we are holding in there. But if we break those lows, then there could be some further pain. Plus, we're going into tax loss selling too.
Yeah. Well, hopefully it keeps going in the right direction. It's been somewhat painful. So hopefully there's good earnings that come out and a lowered CPI, and we can be trending in the right direction. Listen, Jordan, thank you so much for joining me today. I always enjoy having you here when Bruce is not around. I hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving weekend, and we will talk to you soon.
Yeah, same to you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.